In the beginning, no one would have bet a single cent on her. Ludmila was the kind of woman you barely noticed, not because she had nothing to say, but because life had taught her to keep quiet. She moved quietly, worked without complaining, carried everything on her shoulders without ever asking for help. At the factory, she had been part of the scenery for years. Always on time, always serious, always impeccable in her work. 8 years standing in front of her machine, in the din of metal, the smell of hot oil, and the fatigue that clings to your skin. 8 years keeping things running while others spoke louder than she did, boasted more than she did, demanded more than she did. But that morning, everything had changed. She stood at the top of the old factory staircase. A sheet of paper, still warm from the printer, in her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, not because of the cold, not because of fear. Because of that sentence, printed in black and white, which she kept reading over and over, as if her eyes refused to believe it. Workshop supervisor, sector number 3, salary 78,000 rubles, 78,000. For a few seconds, she thought it was a mistake. An extra zero, a line filled out incorrectly, a document meant for someone else. But no, it was indeed her name, her position, her new life. Her heart was beating so hard she could almost hear her pulse drown out the noise of the machines below. 78,000, almost 3 times her previous salary. In her mind, the calculations fell into place automatically. She could help her son with the down payment for his apartment, finally buy real boots for winter instead of having the soles glued back on, breathe a little. Maybe, for the first time in years, think about herself too. She squeezed the paper in her hand to steady her trembling. Beneath her feet, the staircase suddenly seemed symbolic. Downstairs was her past. The endless hours, the turned backs, the condescending looks, the hands worn by work. Upstairs, behind the door, where a new nameplate would soon be hung, lay the unknown. A future that was frightening, yes, but a future that finally belonged to her. When she went back down to the workshop, the workers looked up. Some looked at her with curiosity, others with jealousy. A few with that quiet respect reserved only for those who have truly toiled to get there. "Congratulations, Ludmila Semyonovna," called out a young man from the neighboring line. "Hang in there, boss," added an older worker in a deep voice. It wasn't just congratulations, it was recognition. For the first time in a long while, they no longer called her Luda, as you would call a woman you think is taken for granted, invisible, available. They called her by her first name and patronymic with the respect she deserved. And yet, the hardest part did not await her at the factory. The hardest part awaited her at home. When she came home in the evening, her arms as usual, full with a bag containing bread, kefir, cheap pasta, and a few everyday items, the apartment greeted her with that same cold smell of tobacco, resignation, and laziness that had lingered for far too long. In the entryway, an empty bottle was lying under the coat rack. In the living room, Victor, her husband, slouched in front of the television in a worn-out tank top, didn't even bother to take his eyes off his show right away. "Is there anything to eat?" he asked without turning around. "On the stove," she replied as she took off her coat. Then she paused for a second. Just one, as if her whole life was holding its breath with her. "I got promoted. I'm a workshop supervisor now." This time, he turned his head, slowly, with that heavy, incredulous look of a man who doesn't understand what he's hearing. "What, workshop supervisor? Sector number 3, my salary goes up to 78,000, and then he burst out laughing. Not a nervous little laugh, not a surprised smile. No, a real, loud, boisterous laugh, humiliating. A laugh that filled the room, bounced off the walls, and crashed down on her like a slap. He laughed as if she had just told the most ridiculous joke of the century. "Oh really, you, a supervisor," he choked out between bursts of laughter. "So, that's it, Madame is going to boss us around now?" At that moment, his mother, Raisa Semyonovna, came out of the next room, her knitting needles still in hand. Seeing her son laughing and Ludmila standing motionless in the doorway, she immediately understood that something was going on. And instead of a trace of joy, her face closed into that tight-lipped grimace she reserved for moments when another woman dared to step outside the role she had assigned her. "What is it now?" she asked curtly. "Just imagine, your daughter-in-law has become a supervisor," Victor replied with a sneer. "Workshop supervisor," the old woman sniffed disdainfully. "A supervisor her? And who's going to make dinner? Who's going to wash her husband's socks? Her factory maybe?" Ludmila didn't answer. She walked silently to the kitchen, filled a glass of water from the tap, and drank it in one gulp, her hands trembling. No joy this time, only anger. A cold, deep, ancient anger. The anger of realizing that at the very moment her life was finally opening up, all they felt was a single urgency to slam the door shut again. Victor came in behind her, still laughing, "But don't make that face. It's good news. Now I can brag at the garage. My wife is a supervisor now." He said it as if he were talking about a lottery ticket won by chance. Not about her 8 years of work, not about the sacrifices, not about her merit, just about a trophy he could show off to others. And there, in that too small kitchen, with the tired yellow light on the ceiling and the walls saturated with exhaustion, Ludmila had a brutal revelation. He wasn't proud of her. They were afraid of her because her success was a mirror. And in that mirror, they finally saw their own stagnation, their dependence, their mediocrity, their comfort built on her back. As long as she remained the discreet woman who cooked, paid, tidied up and endured, everything was fine. But the moment she raised her head, their little world wavered. The next day, Ludmila woke up before the alarm. For the first time in a long while, she chose her clothes carefully. She took a dark blue blouse out of the closet, one she saved for important occasions, ironed it thoroughly, tied her hair neatly, then pinned her new badge to her chest. Petrova LS, workshop supervisor, sector number 3. When she arrived at the factory, a strange silence greeted her. No one laughed, no one congratulated her. They were watching her. They were waiting to see how she would walk, speak, give orders, and she understood something essential. All her life, she had kept to the sidelines. That morning, she walked through the workshop, down the center aisle, back straight, eyes fixed ahead, without apologizing for her existence. But at home, nothing changed. Or rather, everything got worse. Victor began to simmer in silence. He would get up late, linger in the kitchen, pretend to be offended, then throw out cutting remarks to see how far he could still put her down. One morning, as she was looking over some files before leaving, he set his cup down on the table a bit too forcefully and said, "It's still strange, isn't it? I've been working here for 15 years, and it's my wife they choose instead of me. You must have really known how to play your cards." She looked up at him. "What are you trying to say?" He shrugged, feigning innocence. "Oh, nothing. Just that in this country, you don't move up like that for no reason." She understood the insinuation perfectly. "Are you saying I slept my way into this job? I'm just saying it's a lot for a woman." She stared at him for a long time. Then, in a calm, almost gentle voice, she replied, "No. What bothers you isn't a woman succeeding. It's your wife succeeding while you stayed in the same place." He blushed, clenched his fists, then left the room, slamming the door. His mother, on the other hand, chose a different strategy. Shame, barbs, slow poison. "A woman shouldn't act like a general," she would mutter in the evening while knitting. "Modesty makes a wife more beautiful, not putting on airs." "I'm not putting on airs," Ludmila replied. "I'm simply owning what I've earned." Earned. A woman earns her peace in a home, not in an office. Ludmila looked her straight in the eyes. "I am Ludmila Petrova. I've been working since 1992. I raised my son on my own. I kept this house standing. And if I was appointed chief, it's because I deserve it." The old woman couldn't stand this answer, because for the first time, her daughter-in-law was no longer apologizing for existing. The weeks went by. At the factory, Ludmila was finding her place, slowly but surely. People learned to obey her. Above all, people learned that she knew what she was doing. She didn't shout. She didn't act like an arrogant superior, but she saw everything, understood everything, and led her team with a calm, almost relentless authority. Results improved, breakdowns decreased. Her department became one of the most stable in the factory. At home, however, every day felt like a silent war. Then, the years went by. 5 years. 5 years, during which Ludmila kept moving forward, while Victor remained stuck in his habits, his excuses, his petty humiliations. And then, one day, the factory was hit by a wave of restructuring. The machines changed, software was introduced, and the old positions disappeared. Management was clear. They needed people who could learn, adapt, and work with new technologies. Those who didn't keep up would have to leave. Ludmila attended the manager's meeting. When the lists were mentioned, she knew even before her name was spoken that Victor would be on it. She said nothing. The day he was summoned to human resources, she saw him from her window. His shoulders, usually puffed up with wounded pride, were suddenly stiff, narrow, almost fragile. 20 minutes later, he came out pale, without his badge, without his files, without a glance. That evening he came home late. The smell of vodka lingered around him, but his face bore something even more terrible than drunkenness: lucidity. "They fired me," he said, throwing his jacket on the floor. "Optimization, modernization. They need young people." That's what they told me. I'm 52 years old, Ludmila. 52. Where do you think I'm going to go now? In the past, she would have rushed to comfort him. She would have made some tea, spoken softly, tried to fix what life had just broken. But that woman no longer existed. She simply looked at him. "Do you have any savings?" He exploded. "What savings? Everything went into the house." She remained motionless. "No, I was the one who paid for the apartment, the electricity, the gas, the groceries, your mother's medicine, and even your cigarettes when you had nothing left. You worked, yes, but you never really built anything." He slammed his fist on the table. "So now you're going to blame me for that too? No, I'm just reminding you of the truth." Then he changed his tone. Like many people who have lost their power, he shifted from pride to pleading. He moved closer to her, his gaze hollow.